President appeals to Britain, use restraint over the Falklands crisis.
First glimpse of Mrs. Thatcher as Prime Minister, and the man that she...
an agreement to end the war and bring peace with honor in Vietnam.
It's all aboard for Korea for 1,200 men of the Slashers, the Old Brags, and the...
The act of unconditional surrender, German land, sea, and air forces in Europe. Today is Victory in Europe Day. Tomorrow will also be Victory in Europe Day.
This country is at war with Germany.
November the 11th, 1918. I'm glad to tell you that the war will be over at 11 o'clock today.
August 4, 1940. Great Britain has declared war on Germany.
When this bloody war is over, oh, how happy I will be. When I put me civvy clothes on, no more soldiering for me. People said when we enlisted, fame and medals we would win. But the fame is in the guard room and the medals made of tin. Why did they bury Germans 20 feet underground? Because deep down, they're really nice. Trench warfare, should always be a last-ditch effort. Come on, people. You see, if you're a soldier, you're either one at home or two at the front. If one, you needn't worry. If two, you're either one out of the danger zone or two in it. If one, you needn't worry. If two, you're either one hit, one not hit, or two hit. If one, you needn't worry. If two, you're either one trivial or two dangerous. If one, you needn't worry. If two, you either one live or two die. If you live, you needn't worry, and if you die, you can't worry, so why worry? No more shooting on a weekday, no more begging for a pass. I will tell the Sergeant Major he can stick it up his ass. I suppose you're going to call me the comedian of the company. What's a German's favourite number? 9. Didn't say I was any good. I left school at 14. One for me. I decided I needed to get my hands dirty. When there were no such thing as health and safety. So I landed myself a job blacksmithing at bloody 14. First day on the grind, they put me under this chap driving steam hammer. Now, for those of you that don't know, a steam hammer is a machine that blows 25 ton with a noise that'll wake a deaf man. Now, you take your workpiece, you pop one end under the hammer, and with the other end, you cling on for dear bloody life. 5 minutes he were with me, and then he started off for a cup of tea. 25 bloody ton. My arm shook. Hey, and you couldn't get anything wrong. Otherwise, Mr. Pen Pusher had come down and give you an earful. Here's one for you. How can you tell a dog belongs to a blacksmith? Because when you tell him off, he makes a bolt for the door. I loved it. Earning me keep and getting on with it. I remember this one day, a couple of years in. They put us all on overtime to finish this big job. Can't remember for the life of me what it was we were making, but what I can tell you is I was absolutely shagged. And not in a good way. So I took a seat, like, just to get my breath back. Next thing, the foreman. Arthur Jenkins his name was. Comes effing and jeffing his way across the shop floor. Stops, dead in front of me, smacks me one right across the chops. So I squared up to him, didn't I? Hey, you know, I've been there a while, I'm 16 now, I've started shaving. I knew it all, didn't I? Now, I probably could have picked a better fight. He was a massive, hulking sort of bloke. Made Big Ben look like a pocket watch. If you don't start pulling your weight round here, son, you are going to find yourself having an accident. I mean, I just stared at him. Bumhole going like the clappers, me nuts shrinking to the size of marbles. One little tap and he puts me down. Boom! Next morning, as I come in, our Arthur was bright as a button. Morning, Bernie, he shouted, as if nothing had ever been the matter. You see, stuff like that geared you up for the army. If you had a problem with a chap, you came to blows and you dealt with it, there and then. You left it on the shop floor and you moved on. It was like that for 4 years. 7 till 5, 6 days a week. It was all so fantastically ordinary. August 1914. The blackest month of the darkest year. Rumours have been growing about a little tiff over in the Far East. Nothing for us to be concerned over. Let them fight it out. Then, like a flash, the trouble deepened. Germany got involved. The word war gripped the nation and the laughter of summer fell silent. One day, about an hour into shift, Arthur rocks up, paper in hand. Here, lads, you seen the paper? Have a listen to this. England declares war on Germany. Bloody hell. At 11 o'clock last night. I mean, none of us really knew what it all meant. For us, we're just a bunch of labourers. Next thing, Mr. Pen Pusher comes along, looking even more flustered than usual.
Right, lads, gather round. Hey, Benson, take your hands out your trousers, man.
You dirty bugger.
Right, listen up. As I'm sure some of you have heard already, we are now at war with Germany. Now, that being as it is, all holiday is now suspended and no, hey, listen! Till further notice, as we push to meet the demand for the war effort. Now, I don't know as yet what it is they're asking of us, but we've had the telegram this morning putting us on standby. Till we know more, everything stays the same.
It didn't. Nothing stayed the same.
Well, Bernie, England is at war, you know. She badly needs young men like you today, eh? Oh, go on, lad. Go and fight for king and country. I'd be going with you if it weren't for my sciatica.
He didn't need to persuade me. I'd already dreamt of what war might be like. Perhaps I might just be in time to see the end if I joined up at once. After all, it'd all be over by Christmas.
Private Court is a funny little conjure with a smile, a funny...
You are not going! I'm your mother and you listen to me, you daft bugger, you're not going! Bernie dear, if your dad was still here, he wouldn't let you. Oh, what's this fascination? Just let him get on with it. Oh, I need you around the house. Who's going to light the fire? I don't care if you say it'll be over by Christmas, you're not going!
Pack up your troubles in your own kit bag and smile, smile, smile.
While there's a Lucifer to light your fags, smile boys, that's the style. August 30th, off I went. Enlistment papers and train tickets shoved into my hand, and just like that, Bernard Roberts became Private Roberts of Kitchener's New Army. Training was all right. I mean, I was already used to the long hours. After all, I was pushing and pulling heavy machinery every day back home. So in comparison, this was easy. And I was good at it. I went full steam into every exercise and drill they could throw at us. It was all just a big adventure to me. To be honest, I was less afraid of the Germans than I was of it all being over before I could get there. And my first taste of battle each morning as the bugle sounded for breakfast. There'd be this massive rush of all these ravenous blokes punching and kicking their way for a bit of grub. Every meal became a minor revolution, where if you weren't crafty or bold enough, you went hungry till the bugle sounded again. Looking back, I wonder if it was all part of the taming process, getting us into the war mentality. A month of this new lifestyle changed my entire outlook. I'd grown hard and tinged with this kind of viciousness. After a while, the officers started to take notice of me. An approving nod here, a firm grunt there, and before I knew it, I was being hauled into the Sergeant Major's office. Well then, Private Robert, have you any idea as to the reason you have been brought in here today? Obviously I didn't. Well, it would seem to me that you are exactly the kind of hard-working, upstanding young chap the British Army needs if we are to win this war by Christmas dinner. You are to be promoted to the rank of Lance Corporal with immediate effect. Sign here. For a while, I was filled with an uncontainable amount of pride. At night, as I lay in my bunk, my mind had turned to the various promotions that surely would be thrust upon me as my shining military career went from strength to strength. I'd strut about the barracks like a man with a broom for a backbone. It was, however, a short-lived window of glory, for a strange and powerful adversary was waiting for me just around the corner. Beer. Like most young men, I remember my first pint of beer very well. Just not very much afterwards. Within the barracks was an area called the wet canteen. Of an evening, if you weren't stuck on sentry duty, you'd head on down for a short spell of bright relief that only the bottom of a beer glass knows. By now it was December. My training and experience had taught me, amongst other things, that the ability to drink beer was one of the essential skills before a man could become a real soldier. To unbalance the brain occasionally was all part of the preparation for fighting and war. After a few days of my newfound affection for the good stuff, a serious bit of responsibility was sent my way. I was ordered on outpost duty overlooking a shell factory. We were to report at 5:30 p.m. sharp, ready to march out the gate into our positions. Owing to that, I was given the day to myself. And together with an old school friend who'd also joined up, we hatched a bit of a plan. We'd get out to the nearest inn and have a nice, quiet afternoon pint. I told myself I'd only have the one. Problem was, I had the one, and had another 6. With only minutes to spare, I made it back to the gate, and off we were into the evening. Now, I don't know if it was the drink. I mean, it definitely was the drink. I decided it would be a great idea to settle the guarding, swap tunics with one of them, and head back out to the inn where my mate was still swigging his way to his wages. I told them, if a sergeant or an officer comes and asks for me, tell him I've gone to fetch some blankets and candles, and I'll be back before long. My plan was foolproof. They agreed, though not before telling me how daft I was being, and wished me luck on my little excursion. Against all odds, I made it to the inn, and sure enough, found my old mate in very high spirits, and all the more so for seeing me. Hey, hey, we're singing along, yes. On moonlight bay, we can hear the voices singing, and they seem to say, you must hold my now. As exciting as I'm sure it would be for me to tell you what happened next, I can't really, because I don't remember anything at all. Now, at some point during the evening I was rumbled. The sergeant came round on his checks, asked where I was, and true to their word, My men said I've gone for clankets and blandles and I'll be back before long. So he said he'd wait, didn't he? He said he'd bloody wait. Of course, I never showed up. Because I, for reasons known only to God, was 30 miles away. We were sailing along on moonlight. Oh. I woke up at 2 a.m. Mouth drier than a camel's arse, and very, very aware that I was lying on the side of a railway line. I followed the tracks back to the nearest station. And come 8 a.m, I was sat on a train back to the barracks, terrified of what would happen when I got there. As I sat there, staring out the window, I had this vision of the entire garrison waiting in the yard, ready to tear me to bits. The reality was much less eventful. No sooner as I went through the gates than I was arrested, and apart from the odd nosy glance, I was thrown into the guard room where I stayed for 18 days awaiting my trial.
Lance Corporal Roberts, you are standing accused of desertion whilst on active duty. Have you anything to say to this charge? You plead guilty to it all, but you must say something, young man, if you'd like us to lighten your sentence. Anything at all. Why don't you go outside and collect your thoughts?
I did. But there was nothing I could think to say, and before long I was being hauled back in front of the court.
Now then, Lance Corporal, have you anything to say in your defence? Young man, I cannot emphasise enough how important it is that you say something to mitigate this charge.
I had nothing. All I could think to say was that I've been 18 days lying in the guard room awaiting my trial.
18 days? Is this true? Well, I'd rather think this young man has suffered quite enough already. The punishment of the court is that the accused revert back to the rank of private and undergo 7 days field punishment number 1.
I wasn't the only prisoner to stand trial that day. Another reckless young soldier was standing trial for causing a fray. He, however, was an irresponsible sort of a lad, displaying almost no signs of remorse for his behaviour. Private Peters. He had a crime sheet as long as your arm, and perhaps the president of the court thought the only way to cure him would be to send him off to France. He ordered him off with the next draft, and as we left, called a warning that will stay with me for as long as I live.
Listen up, Peters. If you don't change your ways, when you get out to France, you shall find yourself in front of a firing squad of British soldiers. Now, you don't want that, do you?
As fate would have it, it was not the last that I would see of Private Peters. I couldn't believe it. The unexpected leniency shown towards me gradually turned to laughter. I actually congratulated myself on receiving so light a sentence. 7 days in solitary confinement with bread and water, and before I even felt it, I was a free man once more. I was given little time for breath. No sooner had I rejoined my company than we got word that we were to go to France the following day. The whole barracks seemed to stand that bit taller. We were hungry for it, ready for the adventure that was waiting for us on the other side of the channel. Bon voyage! The train down to Southampton was packed full. Along the way we laughed, listened and dreamed aloud about what was in store for us now we finally got to go and get stuck in. And we sang. We never seemed to tire of singing. And the songs that we sang carried us on the boat that was to take us to France. Honestly, I've never felt anything like it. The atmosphere was breathtaking. 500 blokes, all with one common thought.
to have the German's trousers down by his ankles and show him what for. That sounded better in my head. I felt drunk on it all. My cheeks ached from laughing so long. I can see it even now, beaming faces and jostling bodies as we steamed our way to the Havre. Along the way, I got chatting to this chap from Newcastle. Somehow, he seemed to stand out from the crowd like a beacon. He had this big, open face that seemed all at once like the hardest and the friendliest I'd ever come across. I'm sure he must have thought I was a bullish young idiot as I babbled on. There was this friendly, reassuring type of manner about him. He told me his name was William, but said that I could call him Bill. He moved from Newcastle with his wife, 2 young children, and was working as a farrier. After half an hour, it seemed like we had known each other for years, and I wondered if this was one of those friendships that life had got planned all along. On arriving in Le Havre, a French captain boarded the ship and sailed us down the River Seine to Rouen. Cosy little villages scattered the riverside, and French families waved and cheered as we snaked our way along the lazy river. One little girl was waving so furiously she almost toppled in and got scolded by her mother. It was a hero's welcome. And like a hero in all good stories, this is where I experienced my first glimmer of romance. Whilst in Rouen, each night they'd send us out on guard duty. This provided a convenient opportunity to get to know a beautiful shopkeeper's daughter who worked on the corner of our post.
Bonjour, monsieur, comment ça va? J'aime votre uniforme. J'aime votre visage. Vous semblez très fort. Voudrez-vous prendre un verre?
Très bon. Je m'appelle Bernard. It was basically love at first sight. I mean, of course it helped that I learnt a bit of the lingo. It was just such a shame that after 3 glorious evenings, I was told to pack up for Wipers. Breaking the news to my little mademoiselle was heartbreaking.
Bernard, Alice, go away, Wipers, Yippers, je hope to see toi again, encore. Pas de problème, je comprends. Ton français m'ennuie et vous ne parlez pas français bien. Au revoir, bonne chance.
And like that, I was off to the Western Front. They put us on a train for Rouen, which dropped us about a day's march away from the line. Along the way, we started to see the reality of the world we were about to enter. About 5 minutes after leaving the train, we realised that something wasn't right. The road to Wipers was completely blocked, with refugees coming the opposite way. The officers ordered us to change track and march along the railway lines. All along the side of the tracks was a mass of bodies. Some moving, most not. In amongst the uniforms were women and children. They'd been involved in what they told us was a gas attack. A gas attack? We didn't have a bloody clue what gas was. But we found out before long. You see, there was no such thing as a gas mask in those early months. Someone shouted gas, you knew you had moments to sort yourself out, maybe less if the wind was up. What was the advice of the top military minds of Great Britain? Piss on a soddy Yankee. If you were lucky, you came out with it with sore eyes, an itchy throat, and 2 nostrils full of the smell of your own waz. If you weren't so lucky, the rotten stuff would eat your lungs like acid. It looked like they were drowning on dry land. They'd beg for water, but a single sip would send them coughing up this greenish froth until they choked to death on the stuff. I was lucky I never got gassed.
Even a bullet out of the blue would be better than going like that. When we arrived in Wipers, the officers lined us up and put us into groups. Bill and I ended up going together to bolster one of the worsted companies. And after a brief introduction to our new comrades, an officer came round to give us our first job. Burying the gassed Canadians. Well, I don't know about you, Bernie, but it's not exactly the first day I had in mind. I mean, I wasn't expecting tea and cake, but bugger me. Still, we can thank our lucky stars we're not Canadian. Poor lads didn't stand a chance. How did you get on with that French lass, by the way? Get yourself a little snog or what? Oh, well, don't you worry about it, lad. Just because you've got a face like a bag of smashed crabs doesn't mean you can't be happy. Here, look at what our little laddie sent us. I mean, it's near Picasso, but I think that's supposed to be me. That's a German over there. And I'm not quite sure, but I think that's Santa Claus in the background. I tell you what, Bernie, I'd give an arm and a leg to give that boy a squeeze. Just smell that bit on the top of his head. That smell. Anyway. You struggling over there, Bernie? Do you need a hand? A step-by-step guide to burying a body. Burying a body is no easy feat, especially when you can only find one of them. The whole idea is to lay the man to rest in peace. And remember the golden rule. Never lose your head. Step 1. Find yourself a suitable candidate. Step 2. Check that they are in fact dead. Top tip, burying a lively chap would be a grave mistake. Step 3. Check the corpse for personal belongings. Photographs, cigarettes, and most importantly, a will. Top tip, a will is a dead giveaway. Step 4. Dig a hole. Step 5. Lift, slide, shovel and fold the man into the hole, burying with a generous helping of mud. Step 6. Smoke the cigs, vomit in a bush, and try and get the smell out of your fingernails. And that was my first week in France, burying the unfortunate sods that died on the front. In the weeks and months that followed, I learned everything there was to know about trench warfare. Shoot, advance, fall back and bury. 3 days on, 3 days off. Ever wondering if today would be your last became ordinary. They moved us round like a giant game of chess. Just as you got used to a man, they either moved one of you on or he got blown up. It wasn't long before Bill and I got separated. And although I asked after him as often as I could, eventually the responses fell silent. Our spirits were lifted each time we received word from home. Letters and parcels that arrive in bundles, bringing us a small amount of comfort in an otherwise bleak surrounding. Mother had sent letters as if they were an artillery barrage. How she afforded the paper to write 2.5 metric tons worth of words, I never found. But I'd write back to her as often as I could.
A private of second company has been sentenced to death. The sentence will be carried out at sunrise tomorrow, and the following men parade with rifles to form the execution squad. Private Bagley, Private Marlowe, Private Thompson, Private Smith, Private Roberts, Private Roberts, Private Roberts, Private Roberts, Mackenzie, Private Thomas, and Private Emma.
I shuddered as the sergeant read my name. And the whole body became numb. To shoot the Germans was almost bearable, but to put a British man to death by our own rifles, it seemed so wrong. Sleep was out of the question that night. Lay awake thinking about this poor bloke, wondering what might be racing through his mind. Because normally, when a man was sentenced to death by firing squad, the party of rifles had been made up by men from a completely different regiment. The idea being that no one would have to shoot their best mate, or John from next door. But, for whatever reason, that's not how it happened. Remember Private Peters?
Listen up, Peters. If you don't change your ways, when you get out to France, you will find yourself in front of a firing squad of British soldiers.
You look different. Sort of smaller. More pathetic. As they marched him out into the parade, I recognised him instantly. I stood. 11 other shaking blokes, our backs to the rifles, military police loading the ammunition. I prayed for a blank. They dragged him over to an old tree stump standing lonely in the middle of the field. Bound into it as if he were a rabid dog. He used a blindfold to cover his eyes, and by now he was hysterical. His lips were moving, but I couldn't hear what he was saying. Perhaps a prayer? More likely a final futile protest to it all. As they ordered us to pick up our rifles, my eyes became blurry. Softly, the officer told us to take aim. Before I could think, the unmistakable punch in my right shoulder told me I didn't have a blank. The military escort cut down his crumpled little body, carried him over to a corner of the field and laid him to rest in an unmarked grave. The idea of Egypt was a thrilling one. In my mind, I daydreamed about those famous biblical places. Jerusalem, Jericho, Galilee. I'd see myself gazing upon them, just as countless eyes must have done throughout the ages. I knew it was fanciful, particularly when I realised that none of those places are in Egypt. But after France, the whole thing seemed just like a holiday. I welcomed the move with open arms. Yeah! Of course, my sense of contentment was short-lived. You see, the thing about the British is we're only really, truly happy when we've got something to complain about. If it rains, it pours. If it's dry, it's parched. If it's cold, it's freezing. And in this case, if it's hot, it's boiling. They issued us with lighter uniforms, shorts, a sun helmet, and our very own pair of special sunglasses. Each morning, as the sun came up, the troops would curse it just as heartily as they cursed Jerry over in France. At night, the various wildlife would make their way across the sand, leaving their tracks in the heavy dew. Come morning, and the tracks had set as the dew dried off, painting this huge picture of the goings-on of the night previous. After 5 minutes of the sun being up, its rays had obliterated every mark, breaking the sun flat for another day. Whoa, 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 whoa. Come on. It would be a beautiful thing if you could see it all from somewhere more temperate. In Egypt, the war was less about the opposition and more about the elements. Believe it or not, the only real death I saw was the camels. And that was nothing to do with the Turks. They load them up so heavy that
every now and again want to just lie down in the heat and give up, seemingly in protest. Odd as it seems, sometimes when the water was running low and the delirium was starting to set in, I'd think about how nice it might be to be one of those camels. Just lie down in the heat, one last sleep in the sun. Some of our comrades out there had only really seen action in Bulgaria, and believe me, that was a walk in the park compared to France. They'd go moaning on about how they'd swapped the desert for a trench in a heartbeat. It was all we could do to laugh at them. Given the choice, I'd have taken heat and dust over mud and blood any day of the week. But choice was a rare thing in the army. Eventually, inevitably I suppose, our battalion received word that we were to return to France, which, as you can imagine, I was overjoyed about. See, in Egypt, I had time to think things over, and that was the problem. In France, we didn't even have time to breathe. We were thrown into this massive theatre of war, and it was all we could do to go into survival mode. And that's where they wanted you. See, if you were thinking too much about what you were doing, it wouldn't take you long to realise that we were being taken for fools. All these officers and generals sat miles behind the front line, sending honest, decent blokes out as if they were disposable. That's what we were to them, disposable. Human life was the cheapest of commodities. I became a conscientious objector. The irony of it is, I was too much of a coward to conscientiously object. I just started to see the old sorry thing for what it really was. The Germans were sat over in their trenches, we were sat over in ours. None of us really wanted to be there. And here we were, blowing each other to bits for a reason that no one could even remember. My only consolation was that as we arrived back in France, a familiar face joined our platoon. Bill. Turned out, almost his entire squad had been wiped out in a failed bombing raid. In all the confusion, the British guns had started shelling no man's land, thinking they were hitting a German attack, when in reality, they were shooting their own troops. Bill got away by the skin of his teeth. By now it was 1916. I'd gone from the sweltering heat of the Egyptian desert to the freezing, wet, muddy pit that was the Somme. Littered with rats, lice, you couldn't move without the feeling that at any moment you might be hit by one of the whistling shells from above. We built the trenches in such a way that if a shell did strike, only a small section of the line had collapsed, burying 3, 4 blokes. Still, as the shelling got ever more frequent, digging out comrades became a daily chore. At night, when the guns fell silent, we'd be ordered out into the blackness to watch for spies or cut the enemy wide. Of course, on occasion, they'd rumble us. And then all hell would break loose with rifle cracks and blokes shouting as both sides scrambled back for home. The bodies of the unfortunate ones would often be left out there for days, strung up on the wire or kneeling frozen where they fell. They looked like puppets, with all the strings cut. After a while, the sun would swell them up like life-size balloons, and they'd turn blue, sometimes navy before the gas eventually escaped, and then they dried up like mummies. It was a case of trying to pass the time. You'd play cards, write letters, and get through anything consumable as quickly as you could. Like most men, I aimed that if I was to catch a bullet, all that would be left on me would be a few crumbs, an empty pack of cigarettes, and obviously a will. As we got further into the war, the officers had come round the night before a big offensive to give out paper for the troops to write any last wishes on. First few times I wrote cheese and biscuits and gave it to them back. But
As things started to feel more desperate, Bill caught me one evening and asked me a favour that knocked me flat. He said that if I was to make it through, and he did not, there was one last letter to his wife that he wanted me to see delivered. And despite my protesting that it had never come to pass, he made me take down the address. Our loss. If this should ever reach you, it'll be a sure sign that I have gone under. What will happen to you and the bairns, I do not know. But trust that from above I'll watch over you and not let you starve. You have been the best of wives, and I love you deeply. How much you will never know. Do think of me sometimes when your grief is worn a bit. Please speak to me now and again at the kippers. If the chance should come your way, for you are young and good looking, should a good man give you an offer, it'd please me to think that you would take it, and not to grieve too much for me. I'm sorry to have left you like this, and I hope in time you will forgive me. So, I'll bid you all farewell, hoping to meet you in the time to come if such a place exists. Know that my last thoughts were of you, the only one I ever loved, the one that made a man of me. Love you dearly, Bill. In response to the British barrage, the German guns had risen. I found him lying a few yards away. The other lads were gone, nowhere to be seen. He looked calm. Perhaps it was the shock, but even when he spoke it was practical, matter of fact. He said, "Bernie, do us a favour, man. Straighten my legs for me." Both his legs were gone. All there was were these two white bones sticking out of his thighs. I remember thinking it was the first time I'd seen pure white in forever. I just sort of touched the bones as if I was kneading them out, and that seemed to satisfy him. He told me to look in his breast pocket, and there was this little photograph which he clutched and grabbed to his chest. He looked me dead on, and he said, "The letter, Bernie." And he closed his eyes, and his brow furrowed slightly as if he was concentrating on something. He went for one last sleep in the sun, clutching a picture of his wife and kids to his heart. Saw death everywhere we looked. He became numb to it. Burying a friend. That's what broke a man. For the next 6 months, I was ordered with a motley mix of blokes to form a burial detail. Start the impossible task of laying the fallen to rest. On paper,
The task was easy. Collect and identify any and all remains, document them, and send them to be reinterred in a more organised fashion. The registered graves were easy, and whilst they were dotted about all over the place, all the identification and head scratching had already been done. The bodies, they were something else. Some of them had been laying half buried in the mud for months, years even. More often than not, you'd have to shovel a man onto the canvas. These poor brave blokes, just a little heap of bones and maggots on the ground. With each man, you'd have to search around to find his disc, whilst his body, if you could even call it that, just fell to nothing between your fingers. I can smell it even now. One of those smells your nose never forgets. My 6-month burial detail came to an abrupt end when one of the chaps digging next to me found himself a landmine. A large piece of shrapnel penetrated my right knee. And in that moment, I knew that that was it for me. I was headed back for England. As it was, my leg healed remarkably well, and though I was never fit for active duty again. As the war was drawing to a close, the colonel of my battalion asked me to go and see him. He wanted to know if I'd be willing to go back to France to help with the burying of the dead. Now that the war is drawing to a close, we need men who are experienced in the whole burial affair. Burial affair. I politely declined, though looking back, I wish I'd told him where to shove his shovel. And that was me, done. A month later, the Germans surrendered and the war was over. But at what cost? It took me a while to find work after the war. What with my leg and the nightmares, I suppose I fell into a bit of a daze. My leg was never right again, but being a war hero meant I found myself lucky and loved. I always say my wife only married me out of pity. We have 3 beautiful children. The eldest is called William, but he lets me call him Bill.
Sign the act of unconditional surrender.
That's right, sir. First glimpse of Mrs. Thatcher.
Argentina's president appeals to Britain, use restraint over the Falklands crisis.
They told us it was the war to end wars. How did that turn out? Truth is, we're warring with each other all the time. They just find a different way to dress it up.
I've often wondered what Bill or any of the less lucky ones would think about it all that. All those years, all those lives, and what for? So 6 blokes could get together in a room at the end of it all and just kiss and make up, draw a line under it all, because that's ultimately what it all boiled down to. Now, I'm sorry to be candid, but I've seen blokes, literally, blown to nothing. I've seen loss of sanity, dignity, hope, the sort of stuff that'd make anyone cry their eyes out. But the thing I still can't deal with is that really, it ain't made the blindest bit of difference. They trot us all out for the armistice and we all drone on with the lest we forget stuff. But really, who's remembering Bill? Or Private Peters? I mean, really remembering. Until it's them or you, war is just a game of numbers, a question of logistics, a case of moving bodies from A to B. Well, I think that's about all I got to say. Is that all alright? Hey, here's one for you. Where did Tommy go after the explosion? Everywhere.